The new Bitcoin world order is being confirmed live right now from the White House. Here we have Donald Trump with Nigel Farage, two Bitcoin bulls. This meeting is directly related to the US Bitcoin plan. And what Russia has revealed here is that Donald Trump and the US want to bring more countries into Bitcoin to pump up their own secret Bitcoin holdings. At least, that's what the Russians have announced, if it's true. At the same time, we have Tom Lee talking live on CNBC about a $200,000 Bitcoin price. I haven't even watched the clip yet. We're going to react to it live, seeing how Bitcoin could rise to $200,000 within 4 months. Totally crazy. We have a super strong statement from Tether, who now wants to focus even more on Bitcoin. They say, we love Bitcoin. Tether loves Bitcoin here. Let's go. Kazakhstan, the next nation, which would also fit into the plan from the USA, as Russia has revealed here. We're now announcing here that we might also build up a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Guys, let's check this out. Smash the like button below. It's so crazy what's happening here. Now everything is happening one after another again. I'm busting my ass here, putting in the effort. So take a second and hit the like button below. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit subscribe so you can really stay up to date with what's going on here. We're here witnessing history in the making, experiencing the monetization of an asset live. And yeah, here the playbook is coming together piece by piece. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate, that it has to be exactly like this. But Russia, there was that video, you can check it out in the library. 2 or 3 videos ago, or so, I posted it online, how the Russian advisor to Donald Trump, his personal advisor, actually revealed the US plan, that they want to reset the $35 trillion of US debt by building up massive holdings of Bitcoin, and probably already secretly have these Bitcoin reserves. And now we're going to get into what this has to do with Nigel Farage, who was recently a guest with Donald Trump. Here, a potential new prime minister in the UK. But first, we see a strong statement here from Tether. Tether loves Bitcoin. In the past 12 months, Tether has added more Bitcoin to its reserves than any other ETF except for 3, and at the same time has contributed to 21, or XX1, the third largest Bitcoin treasury company after Strategy and Mara. Thank you for that. And it's a very clear statement, because a lot of people have been spreading FUD. They've been saying that Tether is selling Bitcoin and buying gold with it. They're not bullish on Bitcoin anymore. No, instead, right on the day after the FUD comes out, they make a massive statement. Yes, we're still bullish on Bitcoin. We even love Bitcoin. And now here, the president of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, that's a really tough name, a real, proper Kazakh name, is promoting the establishment of a state crypto reserve. So, not explicitly Bitcoin, if I understood correctly, but crypto in general. Probably like all other strategic reserves, with a focus on Bitcoin, because anything else wouldn't make sense. That would just be nonsense. Only holding Bitcoin long-term as a state reserve makes sense. Even the shitcoiners agree that having a state reserve with some random shitcoins, which are then centrally managed again, just doesn't make much sense. And now, before we look at Tom Lee and do the live reaction, we're actually going to talk about Nigel Farage, who was just visiting Donald Trump. It's good to be back in the Oval Office. So, right here in front of the White House. And here David Bailey also writes, Bitcoin world order coming together nicely. And that was also a plan, or rather a key part of the plan, that the Russians published about the US, to reset the $35 trillion in debt, in the meantime transferring all the US debt into stablecoins, then letting the whole thing hyperinflate, or doing a debt reset or something along those lines. And in the meantime, the US is already sitting in the lifeboats. Everyone is safe in the harbor, in Bitcoin. Trump, Nigel Farage, and so on. And then, of course, the strategy also includes pulling more and more nations into Bitcoin. And the question is, are they actually talking about Bitcoin here? Is it really like the Russians say, that this is the big plan, to pull all the nations into Bitcoin now? I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it's just a conspiracy theory. Who knows, maybe the US has no plan when it comes to Bitcoin. Or maybe they're just pretending not to have a plan for Bitcoin. Maybe they have a plan, maybe they don't. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you haven't seen the video about the Russian plan yet, I definitely recommend it, because it'll make a lot more things clear to you. Of course, I couldn't explain everything in detail again that the advisor said here in the live interview about Putin and the US Bitcoin plan. And with that, I'd say let's go. Tom Lee, Wall Street legend, who's always extremely bullish, is now live here on CNBC. Let's check this out real quick. I'm really curious to hear what he has to say.
Tom, Bitcoin, before we let you go, tell us what you think. We're at about $111,000. The upside, the downside from here?
Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies like Ethereum are super sensitive to monetary policy. So I think that September 17th is an important catalyst. Crypto typically does really well in the fourth quarter. So I think Bitcoin can easily get to 200,000 before year end. I know it's a big move. It's almost a double. But that's also
almost
going to be
a double from here. Let's just take a...
So that's really wild. Bitcoin price almost doubling by the end of the year. And he just says, hey, we've seen that Q4 has traditionally always been very strong. Right now, Everyone assumes that Q4 will be very, very strong again. But that's also risky, because if everyone expects it, well, then it could also backfire. We see that so often. Bitcoin keeps surprising us again and again and again. So be really careful when you say, okay, the story will just keep repeating itself. But we've seen it. This would now be the fourth time that the cycles repeat themselves exactly. Almost exactly. And then he says here, okay, September 17th will be important. And what's happening then? That's when the rate cuts by the central bank are happening. At the moment, it looks like we have 25 basis points locked in, and even the probability of a 50 basis point rate cut is becoming more and more likely. Well, I wouldn't say it's likely, but it's definitely on the table. We're already at over a 10% chance that this could actually happen. And according to Tom Lee, that's obviously going to give the markets a boost.
A double from here, so everybody's listening to this. We're at $111,000, and you think by Christmas time, effectively, we could be at 200,000?
That's right. One of the reasons Bitcoin stalled this year is the Fed's been on pause for 9 months. That pause all year, if you look at an easing cycle, that's only happened 2 other times, in 1998 and 2024, where the Fed began to resume cuts in the fourth quarter in September. Equities do really well. As you know, crypto is beta to equity. So I think it's going to be a very strong fourth quarter. Small caps should also rally, like IWM, but that also is really bullish for Ethereum.
So he's saying here that what's about to happen is bullish for everyone, for Ethereum, for small caps, for stocks in general, tech stocks, and so on. And he says the Bitcoin price is still struggling because only twice before has something similar happened as in 2024, where central banks are still holding back and not lowering interest rates as much as, for example, other central banks around the world have already done. In the EU, Switzerland, and so on. Interest rates are going down, but in the US, Jerome Powell is still having a hard time with it. Maybe it's actually a political move, because there are a lot of signs pointing to this being a politically motivated maneuver to get back at Donald Trump. Because that's just something you need to know. If no money flows into the market here, it looks like the economy is crap, like the economy is stagnating. I mean, it's not just how it looks. Sometimes that's actually the case, as you can see in the job market, and so on. But if you let this money flow into the market, then it looks like Donald Trump has everything under control. Yeah, the economy is booming, new jobs and so on. That's exactly the effect Donald Trump wants to trigger. That's why he wants to cancel Jerome Powell. And he simply says there have only been 2 similar scenarios like the current one in the last 100 years or so. And that's currently leading to suppressed Bitcoin prices, to suppressed risk on asset prices. And check this out. Here we also got another confirmation of what Tom Lee is already saying. Here from Kobasi, unfortunately, who write that the Fed is on the verge of joining the global interest rate cutting cycle. And that's exactly what Tom Lee is waiting for. As soon as they join this rate-cutting cycle, as long as they're still holding back, the Bitcoin price will continue to struggle. Worldwide, there have been 88 interest rate cuts since the beginning of the year, the most since 2020. And now, surprise, surprise, what has happened at the Federal Reserve? Absolutely nothing yet. That means we have more rate cuts than ever before. But nothing happened at the Federal Reserve. And that's the key central bank. It doesn't matter what happens in Europe, in Switzerland, and so on. Sure, they have a little influence. Okay, maybe China or Japan have a bit more influence, but the EU, Switzerland, and so on are really irrelevant here. According to Bank of America, this means that 2025 is on track to become the 3rd fastest global rate-cutting cycle of all time. But still, it says here that the Fed, the most important central bank in the world, is excluded, while the European Central Bank and the Bank of England have cut their key interest rates 4 and 3 times respectively this year. And this week, we have another potential rate cut coming from the ECB. The Bank of Canada has cut rates twice, as has the Swiss National Bank, which was the first major central bank to bring rates back down to 0%. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve is sticking to its unchanged interest rate policy in 2025. US monetary policy is a world of its own. And as I said, that's not just the case from a monetary perspective, but there are also political influences at play here. And we can clearly see that central banks are not truly independent, that central banks are major players for political power elites. That's codependency. The central bank controls politics. Politics in turn controls the central bank, and so on. And we see this not only in the USA. There's always Christine Lagarde telling us, yes, we're independent. We're an independent central bank. Bullshit. Are you really independent? You're playing the same game as the politicians, 1-to-1. Fiscal policy and the central bank are merging. All these interventions and so on in the market. So this has absolutely nothing to do with independence. But guys, now let me know what you think about this. Are you as bullish as Tom Lee here? Or is he overdoing it? Of course, you always have to say, Tom has an interest in pumping his own bags. Just like Saylor, just like Trump, just like Best and just like Howard Ludwig, and so on. Of course, they've all loaded up their bags. You have to mention that too. Yeah, and with that said, if you still want to buy Bitcoin, if you're looking for a great platform, then I absolutely recommend you check out 21. I can wholeheartedly recommend Bitcoin. I'll put a link down below to 21 Bitcoin, where you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin and use the Bitcoin Hotel. You can even get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. See you guys until then. Peace.